Right now, across the globe, some of the brightest minds in technology and engineering are actively planning to mine the moon. They're designing robotic spacecraft capable of extracting precious metals, water ice, and rare minerals from the lunar surface, a feat that could reshape our future as a spacefaring civilization. It sounds like the plot of a science fiction novel, but the reality is, this frontier is closer than we think. Yet, what if I told you this ambition to take from the heavens is not a new dream for humanity? What if our ancestors, thousands of years ago, witnessed, or perhaps even attempted, something eerily similar? Picture this: ancient myths from civilizations separated by vast oceans and centuries, all echoing the same haunting warning: do not mine the sky, do not disturb the moon. Do not steal from the stars. These stories are more than just folklore. They feel like a message, one we are on the verge of ignoring. From the blood-soaked fields of Greek mythology to the celestial warnings etched in Hindu epics and Native American oral traditions, our forebears wove tales of divine punishment, cosmic imbalance, and irreversible catastrophe for those who dared to violate the sanctity of the heavens. They spoke of gods enraged by human arrogance, of skies weeping, of worlds thrown into chaos. For a long time, these myths were dismissed as poetic imaginings, symbolic stories with no grounding in literal truth. But now, as humanity prepares to launch its first mining drills into the silent dust of the moon, we have to ask ourselves, were these ancient cultures trying to tell us something we desperately need to hear? In this video, we're going to explore why these myths emerged, what hidden wisdom they might contain, and whether in our rush toward progress, we're repeating mistakes our ancestors warned us against millennia ago. This isn't just a journey into the past, it's a conversation with it, and it might just change how you see our future. To truly grasp the gravity of these ancient warnings, we must first journey back to the misty peaks of Mount Olympus, to one of the most foundational stories of Western civilization, the myth of Prometheus. In this tale, fire is far more than a simple tool for warmth or cooking. It represents the very spark of technology, knowledge, and civilization itself, the ultimate power that separated humanity from the beasts. And it belonged solely to the gods. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, saw the potential in humankind and made a fateful decision. He dared to ascend to the heavens, steal that sacred fire, and deliver it to mortals below. His motive wasn't malice, but a form of compassionate ambition, a desire to elevate the human condition. Yet, this act of taking what was not given, of appropriating a celestial resource for mortal use, was met with a punishment of such horrific and creative brutality that its echo still chills us today. The king of the gods, Zeus, did not simply strike Prometheus down. He devised an eternal, agonizing torture. Prometheus was chained to a rock where each day a great eagle would descend to tear out his liver. Each night the liver would regenerate, only for the cycle of torment to begin again at dawn. This wasn't just a punishment, it was a statement. The message from the divine was absolute and terrifying. Some thresholds are not meant to be crossed. Some resources are not meant to be taken. The cost for such transgression is not a simple fine or a slap on the wrist, but a fundamental, unending violation of one's very being. When we read this myth not as a simple story but as a profound allegory for our current moment, the parallels to modern space mining become startlingly clear. The fire Prometheus stole can be seen as a metaphor for the precious resources we now seek in the heavens. The water ice trapped in lunar craters that could become rocket fuel, the rare earth minerals and metals like platinum and helium-3 that could power future technologies on Earth. We, like Prometheus, operate from a place of seemingly noble ambition. We seek to elevate humanity, to secure our future, to push the boundaries of what is possible. But the myth forces us to ask a difficult question. Are we, in our relentless pursuit of progress, committing a modern act of divine theft? Are we preparing to take what the ancients perceived as belonging to a realm beyond our own? Zeus's reaction symbolizes a universe that maintains a delicate and sacred balance, a cosmic order that is violently disrupted by arrogant ambition. The eternal punishment of Prometheus is a warning about consequences that are not just severe but cyclical and inescapable. It suggests that some actions set into motion a chain of retribution that we cannot simply outrun or out-engineer. This story, etched into the bedrock of Greek culture, is perhaps the ultimate cautionary tale against overreach. It tells us that the desire to elevate ourselves is inherent, but that acting upon that desire without humility, without respect for the boundaries of the natural and the cosmic, invites a catastrophe of divine proportions. But the cautionary tales of the Mediterranean are far from alone. If we journey north to the harsh and beautiful lands of the Vikings, we find a cosmic vision so fundamentally different from our own that it challenges the very premise of treating the heavens as a resource. For the Norse, the universe was not a cold, dead vacuum sprinkled with rocks and minerals. It was a vast, breathing, living entity. At the center of everything stood Yggdrasil, the immense world tree. Its branches stretched into the heavens, cradling the realm of the gods, while its roots delved deep into the wells of fate and wisdom, anchoring the 9 interconnected worlds of their cosmos. This was not a metaphor for something else. To them, this was the structure of reality, a single, sacred, living system where every action in one realm sent ripples through all the others. This profound sense of a connected, animate cosmos finds its origin in their creation story. In the beginning, there was the primordial giant Ymir. From his body, the first gods fashioned the entire world. His flesh became the soil, his blood the oceans, his bones the mountains, and his skull the dome of the sky. His very eyebrows were used to build a protective wall around the realm of humanity. Every part of the physical world was therefore literally born from a living being. The ground we walk on, the air we breathe, the stones we hold, in this worldview, all of it is sacred anatomy. This changes everything. In such a universe, to mine an asteroid or drill into the moon is not an act of engineering. It is an act of violence. It is not resource extraction. It is desecration. It would be the equivalent of taking a scalpel to the flesh of Ymir or carving a piece from the sacred wood of Yggdrasil itself. The consequences in Norse mythology for violating such natural sanctity are never abstract. They are direct and cataclysmic. The gods themselves are bound by this cosmic order, and their stories are filled with warnings about disrupting the balance. The dreaded event of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, is itself triggered by a breakdown of this natural order, a fracturing of the bonds that hold the worlds together. To a culture that saw the stars not as distant balls of gas, but perhaps as embers from Muspelheim or sparks from the forge of the gods, the idea of scooping them up for profit would be the ultimate hubris. It would be a declaration that we see the universe as a corpse to be dissected, not a body to be respected. This perspective forces a deeply uncomfortable question upon our modern ambitions. Our entire approach to space is fundamentally mechanistic. We see our asteroid and we calculate its monetary worth in platinum and palladium. We look at the moon and we see a refueling station. The Norse worldview asks us to consider what we lose when we default to this view. It suggests that by seeing the cosmos as dead, we might be making it so, spiritually if not physically. It proposes that the greatest danger of space mining may not be the technical challenges or even the potential for political conflict, but a profound philosophical failure, a failure to recognize that we are not separate from the universe but a part of it. That we might be, quite literally, mining our own kin. This theme of cosmic violation and its dire consequences is not confined to the West. If we travel to the ancient Indian subcontinent, we find a myth so grand in its scale and so precise in its warning that it feels almost prophetic for our current dilemma. This is the story of the churning of the ocean of milk, a cornerstone of Hindu cosmology found in texts like the Puranas and the Mahabharata. The narrative begins with the gods who have been weakened by a curse. To regain their strength and immortality, they need Amrita, the nectar of eternal life. But this nectar lies at the very bottom of the cosmic ocean. Realizing the task is too monumental for them alone, they make a fateful pact with their eternal adversaries, the Asuras or demons. Together, they decide to churn the entire universe. They uproot the massive Mandara mountain to use as a churning rod and enlist Vasuki, the king of all serpents, to serve as the rope. The gods take hold of Vasuki's tail, the demons take his head, and they begin to pull back and forth, churning the primordial waters with unimaginable force. The ambition is staggering. They are not merely digging a mine. They are putting the entire cosmos into a centrifugal spin to extract its most precious resource. At first, their endeavor seems successful. From the churning depths, incredible treasures begin to emerge. The divine physician Dhanvantari, the goddess of wine, the moon, and the divine elephant Airavata. But then something else surfaces, something no one planned for. Before the nectar of immortality appears, the ocean yields a substance of pure, concentrated death, a thick, suffocating, all-consuming poison known as hala hala. This poison is so potent, so violently toxic, that its very vapor begins to scorch the heavens and threaten all of creation. The project, launched with such high hopes, has immediately produced a catastrophic byproduct that risks annihilating everyone involved. The parallel to our modern ambitions is chilling. We, too, are forming alliances between governments and private corporations, modern-day Devas and Asuras, to undertake a monumental churning of the celestial ocean. We plan to use immense machinery to drill, extract, and process the materials we find. We focus on the treasures, the water for fuel, the platinum for technology, the rare minerals for wealth. The Hindu myth asks us, what is our hala hala? What deadly poison might we unleash in our single-minded pursuit of these cosmic resources? This could be a literal, physical contamination. The fine, abrasive dust of the moon, known as regolith, could be incredibly harmful if inhaled, potentially causing a form of extraterrestrial silicosis. Or perhaps we might accidentally bring back a previously unknown pathogen, a cosmic virus dormant in the eternal ice of a crater. But the poison could also be metaphorical, a spiritual and societal toxin. The myth suggests that the very act of such large-scale cosmic extraction could unleash a venom of conflict and greed here on Earth. If one nation or corporation claims the richest asteroid, does that not sow the seeds for a new form of colonial warfare, a toxic scramble for the stars? The story provides a solution, but it is not a simple one. The world is saved only when the god Shiva, in an ultimate act of self-sacrifice and compassion, gathers the entire ocean of poison into his hands and drinks it. His consort, Parvati, grips his throat to prevent the poison from reaching his stomach, and it turns his throat blue, earning him the name Nilakantha, the blue-throated one. He contains the catastrophe, but he is forever marked by it. The message is profound. Innovation and ambition are not inherently evil. The churning does eventually produce the nectar. But the path to progress is fraught with existential risks that we are often blind to in our initial fervor. The myth insists that we must have a plan for the hala hala. We must have our Shiva, a fail-safe, a containment protocol, a deep ethical framework, and a sense of responsibility profound enough to willingly bear the cost of cleaning up our own mess. Without that, we are simply demons and gods blindly pulling on a serpent, unleashing a poison we have no way to control. Moving from the epic, cosmic scale of the Hindu churning myth, we find a story in Chinese mythology that feels intensely personal and yet carries a warning of equal gravity. It is the tale of the divine archer Yi and his fateful encounter with the 10 sons. In ancient China, it was believed that 10 sons, each one a 3-legged crow residing in a mulberry tree at the edge of the world, would take turns crossing the sky. This was the celestial schedule, a perfect and divinely ordained rotation that provided light and warmth to the earth without overwhelming it. But one day, the suns grew bored of their routine. In a fit of childish rebellion, they decided to race across the heavens together. The effect on the world below was instant and catastrophic. The heat of 10 suns baking the land simultaneously caused rivers to boil away, forests to ignite into continent-spanning wildfires, and the very soil to crack and crumble into dust. Humanity and all living creatures faced absolute annihilation. Seeing the suffering below, the great deity Dai-Jun, who was also the father of the 10 sons, made a difficult decision. He summoned the peerless archer Yi, endowed him with a divine red bow and white arrows, and sent him to earth with a clear command, to reason with the suns and persuade them to return to their proper order. Yi descended and attempted to negotiate, but the suns, arrogant in their collective power, ignored him and continued their destructive game. Faced with the imminent end of all life, Yi made a choice. He raised his bow, took aim, and one by one shot 9 of the suns out of the sky. As each 3-legged crow was pierced, it fell to earth as a mass of boiling feathers, and the world began to cool. The land was saved. By any human measure, Yi was the ultimate hero. He had performed an impossible feat to rescue all of creation from a fiery death. He had done what was necessary, but in the eyes of the cosmic order, he had committed an unforgivable crime. The suns, though rebellious, were divine celestial bodies. Their existence and their number were part of a balance far older and more complex than any single act of heroism. For the transgression of destroying them, Yi was punished severely. The Emperor of Heaven, furious at the destruction of his grandsons, stripped Yi and his wife Chang of their immortality, casting them out of the celestial realms to live as mortals on the earth they had saved. This is the stunning paradox at the heart of the myth. Yi's actions were simultaneously the salvation of humanity and a profound violation of cosmic law. He was right from our perspective, but wrong from the perspective of the heavens. This story establishes a terrifying precedent that resonates deeply with our current ambitions. It suggests that interfering with celestial bodies is an act of such gravity that it carries consequences regardless of our intentions. We might look at an asteroid and see a potential hazard, a rock that could one day threaten Earth, and justify mining it or blowing it apart for our own safety. We might look at the moon and see a barren, dead rock, justifying our extraction by claiming it has no ecosystem to disrupt. The myth of Yi asks us, who are we to make that judgment? What unseen role does that asteroid play in a gravitational ballet we barely understand? What if the moon, in its silent orbit, performs a function in stabilizing our planet or our solar system that we have not yet comprehended? Yi saw 9 problems and solved them. He could not see that his solution would break the system in a way he could never repair. His punishment was not for a lack of heroism, but for a lack of humility. He applied a permanent, violent solution to a temporary problem, and the cosmos exacted a price. As we develop plans for planetary defense that involve altering the orbits of asteroids, or discuss mining operations that could change the mass and thus the gravitational pull of celestial bodies, we are stepping into his shoes. We are claiming the right to alter the heavens for what we believe is a just cause. This ancient myth urges extreme caution, proposing that the universe is a delicate, interlocking system where every component, no matter how seemingly superfluous or dangerous, has a purpose in a grand design we are not qualified to edit. From the celestial scale of Hindu churning and Chinese archery, we find a story that brings the warning down to the earth, yet its message about sacred spaces is universal. In the world's oldest surviving epic, the tale of Gilgamesh, we encounter a king whose ambition is as towering as the walls of his city, Uruk. Gilgamesh, 2/3 god and 1/3 man, is a whirlwind of restless energy, a leader who has exhausted all earthly challenges and now seeks to cement his name in eternity. His new goal is not in the stars but in a forbidden forest, the magnificent cedar forest, a realm of ancient, towering trees that is the treasured possession of the gods and protected by a terrifying guardian, the demon Humbaba. This is not simply a quest for timber. For Gilgamesh, the cedars represent the ultimate prize, a resource so divine that harvesting it would be his greatest achievement, a testament to his power that would echo through the ages. He is convinced that the glory of the conquest will outweigh any cost. His loyal friend, the wild man Enkidu, who was created by the gods specifically to temper Gilgamesh's excesses, tries to warn him. He speaks of Humbaba's roar being like the flood, his breath like fire, and his jaws like death itself. Even the elders of Yuruk plead with their king, urging him to reconsider, to not disturb the sacred grove. But Gilgamesh will not be swayed. He sees their caution not as wisdom but as fear. With Enkidu at his side, he embarks on the journey, believing their combined strength can overcome any divine protection. When they finally stand before Humbaba, the guardian does not immediately attack. He argues with them, reason being his first weapon. He warns them of the sanctity of the forest, the anger of the god Enlil who placed him there, and the inevitable punishment that will follow their transgression. But Gilgamesh, encouraged by the sun god Shamash who provides strategic help, presses the attack. In a fierce battle, they subdue Humbaba, as the demon begs for his life, offering Gilgamesh all the trees in the forest if only he is spared. A moment of hesitation arises. But ultimately, convinced by Enkidu that they must leave no vengeful witness, Gilgamesh beheads Humbaba. The act is one of supreme violence, but also of profound violation. They have not just killed a monster, they have murdered the appointed guardian of a holy place. They then proceed to do exactly what they came for. They chop down the sacred cedars, clearing whole swaths of the divine forest. In that moment, they are triumphant. They return to Yuruk as the greatest heroes who ever lived, hauling the gigantic head of Humbaba and the priceless cedar wood as trophies. They have taken what was not theirs, and they believe they have won. But the cosmic bill for such an act always comes due. The punishment is not delivered by a low-level functionary. It is decreed by the highest court of the gods themselves. In council, they decide that one of the two must die for the crime. Enkidu, the once wild man who became civilized and followed his friend into sin, is chosen. He is struck down by a debilitating and humiliating illness. For 12 long days he suffers, wasting away as his body fails him, all while raging against the injustice of his fate. His death is slow, painful, and deeply personal. Gilgamesh is left utterly shattered. His greatest victory has led directly to his most profound loss. The glory of the cedarwood means nothing in the face of his friend's corpse. He is forced to witness the true cost of his ambition, a price paid not by him, but by the person he loved most. This is the elegant and brutal logic of the myth. The punishment is not a lightning bolt from a clear sky. It is the inevitable, cascading consequence of the act itself. By violating the sacred balance, Gilgamesh set in motion a chain of events that would destroy a part of his own world. The parallel to our modern ambitions is startlingly direct. We look at the moon, at asteroids, at Mars, and we see resources. We see the celestial equivalent of the cedar forest, pristine, ancient, and full of valuable materials. We are confident in our technology, our robotic probes, and our drills, which are the modern equivalents of Gilgamesh's axe. We believe we can enter these realms, extract what we want, and leave without consequence because we see them as empty, dead spaces. But what if they are not? What if they are, in a cosmological sense, protected, not by a demon like Humbaba, but by something far more inescapable, by natural law, by ethical imperative, by a fragile balance we do not yet understand? The myth suggests that the act of taking itself might be the violation, regardless of our tools or intentions. Enkidu's death is the metaphorical consequence we never factor into our cost-benefit analyses. It represents the unforeseen collateral damage, the cultural contamination, the geopolitical conflict, or the ecological catastrophe we bring upon ourselves by reaching too greedily into a realm we were meant to observe and respect. Gilgamesh's story ends not with him celebrating his eternal fame, but with him weeping in the dust, clutching his dead friend, finally understanding that some treasures are cursed by their very nature. The cedars were never meant to be his. Their value was intrinsic to their place in the world, not in their utility to a king. The epic asks us if our quest for celestial resources, for all its glorious promise, might ultimately leave us alone, grieving for a balance we didn't realize we needed until we broke it. Across the Pacific, embedded in the soil and stories of the Americas, we find a perspective that completes this global chorus of caution. For countless Native American traditions, the sky was never a void to be conquered or a treasury to be plundered. It was and is a vibrant, living tapestry, the sacred realm of ancestors, spirits, and cosmic beings. To look up at the stars was to look upon the campfires of one's forebears. To gaze at the moon was to see a powerful, watchful grandmother. In this worldview, every celestial body possesses a spirit and a purpose, intimately woven into the great web of life that connects all things, both seen and unseen. This profound sense of kinship with the cosmos established a clear and universal ethical principle. The heavens are to be honored, not harvested. Among the Lakota, for instance, the stars are considered the spirits of the departed, and their patterns tell the stories of creation and morality. Disturbing them would be an act of profound disrespect, a desecration of a spiritual cemetery. For the Anishinaabe peoples, the moon, or Dibik-Jesus, is a grandmother figure, a guide and protector who regulates the cycles of life. You do not drill into your grandmother to see what she is made of. You offer her tobacco and prayers. This is not a primitive superstition, but a sophisticated ecological and philosophical framework that recognizes the inherent value and sentience of the entire universe. It is a system of knowledge that understands balance as the fundamental law of existence. This brings us to a specific and startling warning from the Hopi people of the American Southwest. Their prophecies, passed down through oral tradition for generations, speak of a series of worlds and the purifications that come when humanity falls out of balance with nature. Central to these prophecies is a specific warning about a time when the gourd of ashes would fall from the sky, a clear reference to the atomic bomb, and when people would eventually journey to the moon. The prophecy states that when this happens and when they begin to mine it and bring pieces of it back to Earth, it will signal that the end of the current world cycle is near. The reason given is not technological but spiritual. The moon is seen as a crucial spiritual counterweight, a celestial body that helps maintain the balance of forces on our planet. To damage it, to remove parts of it, is to disrupt that delicate equilibrium, leading to a chain reaction of ecological and spiritual chaos on Earth. The imbalance we create in the sky would manifest as imbalance here: more extreme weather, societal collapse, and a deep forgetting of our connection to the natural world. This is not a prediction of arbitrary divine punishment, but a statement of cause and effect. When you violate the balance of a system in which you are an embedded part, the system reacts. The Hopi warning echoes the Norse belief in a living cosmos and the Greek warning of dire retribution, but it grounds it in a direct causal relationship between our actions in the heavens and the consequences on our home planet. It suggests that space mining is not an isolated act of exploration, but an intervention into a complex, living system that we barely understand, with reverberations we cannot possibly predict. In this view, the dust we bring back from the moon is not just a mineral sample. It is a part of a living entity, and its removal could have effects we are not equipped to measure with our instruments, only with our spirits. This profound connection between the celestial and the terrestrial, between the moon and the very fabric of life, finds one of its most powerful expressions in the diverse mythologies of Africa. Here, the moon is rarely a cold, dead rock. It is a living, breathing entity, often a creator god, a wise elder, or a benevolent guardian whose rhythms are inseparable from our own. To understand this perspective is to fundamentally shift how we view our place in the cosmos. Consider the creation myth of the Bushmen of the Kalahari. In their tradition, the moon is not merely a symbol of time, but its very source. The story tells that in the earliest days, the sun was a man who carried a torch of brilliant, scorching light. His heat was so intense that it made life on Earth unbearable. Seeing the suffering, the moon, who was also a person, offered a solution. He suggested they exchange their lights. The sun agreed, and so the moon took the sun's blinding, fiery torch and gave him his own gentle, cool light in return. This is why the moon now shines with a borrowed, reflective glow, and why the sun burns with an inherent, fierce fire. But the moon did something even more extraordinary. After creating the cool night, he took a handful of ash and threw it into the sky, creating the stars to provide just enough light for humans to find their way home in the darkness. In this beautiful narrative, the moon is the reason life is possible. It is the being who actively engineered a habitable world, tempering the sun's wrath and providing guidance in the dark. It is a creator, a protector, and a constant, calming presence. To mine such an entity would be, in this worldview, an act of profound ingratitude and a direct assault on the very architect of our comfortable existence. This is not an isolated belief. For the Zulu people, the moon, or Ainyanga, is deeply intertwined with human fertility and agricultural cycles. Rituals and important community decisions are often aligned with the phases of the moon, acknowledging its power to influence growth both in the fields and in the womb. It is a sacred regulator. To interfere with its surface would be akin to tampering with the fundamental timing mechanism of life itself. The logical conclusion of such a worldview is a warning: disturb the regulator and you disrupt the regulated. This is precisely the catastrophe we find in the traditions of the Maasai people. Their oral histories contain a poignant tale of a time when the moon was much closer to the Earth. Its gravitational pull was so strong that it caused massive, unpredictable tides and strange behavior in both animals and people. The world was out of balance. The community elders, seeing the chaos, came together and made a collective decision. They called out to the moon, pleading with it to move further away for the good of all creation. The moon, in its compassion, acquiesced, retreating to its current distant orbit and restoring harmony to the world. This story is a stunningly accurate allegory for the moon's actual role in stabilizing Earth's axial tilt, which gives us our predictable seasons and a stable climate. The myth encodes a deep, intuitive understanding of a complex astronomical relationship, but it also contains a direct warning: the moon moved away once to save us. The implication is clear: if we were to somehow bring it closer again or significantly alter its mass through large-scale mining, we would be recklessly undoing that ancient life-saving act. We would be inviting back the chaos that the moon itself volunteered to end. These narratives collectively frame the moon not as a passive object, but as an active, sentient participant in a shared existence. It is a partner in the dance of life, not a resource to be exploited. This perspective challenges the very core of the modern space mining paradigm, which is built upon a foundation of mechanical, dead-world assumptions. The African mythological tradition suggests that our separation of the heavens from the earth is a false dichotomy. In their view, what happens there happens here. A wound inflicted upon the moon is not an isolated event in a distant vacuum. It is a wound inflicted upon a kin, a guardian, a creator. The catastrophic change is not necessarily a magical punishment from an angry god, but a natural, systemic consequence, a rebalancing of a relationship we have violently disrupted. When we look up at the moon through this lens, the question changes from what can we take from it to what do we owe it. Now, we voyage across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean to encounter a culture that did not just observe the stars but conversed with them. For the Polynesian voyagers, the original masters of open ocean navigation, the heavens were not a map to be conquered, but a living, breathing network of ancestral guides. Their entire existence, their ability to find tiny islands in an ocean larger than all the continents combined, depended on a relationship of profound, sacred trust with the cosmos, a trust that would be shattered by the very notion of space mining. These navigators, known as wayfinders, possessed a knowledge system that modern science is still striving to fully comprehend. They memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars. They understood the subtle patterns of ocean swells, the flight paths of birds, and the color of the clouds above distant lagoons, but this was not a cold, mechanistic calculus. In their worldview, every star was an Omakua, a deified ancestor, a living spirit whose light was a conscious act of guidance. The constellation of Maui's fishhook was not just a pattern, it was the actual tool of the demigod still lodged in the sky. The Milky Way was not a collection of distant suns, it was the long shark, a celestial pathway. To use these stars for navigation was to enter into a reciprocal relationship with them. The wayfinder would chant to the stars, sing their histories, and offer prayers of gratitude for their steady presence. In return, the stars provided safe passage. This was a dialogue, not a download. This relationship was protected by a system of strict spiritual and practical laws known as kapu, often translated as taboo. There were kapu against sailing during certain celestial phases, kapu against disrespectful speech while navigating, and kapu that governed the entire sacred endeavor of wayfinding. To violate these kapu was not merely to break a rule, it was to sever the connection with the guiding spirits, to risk becoming spiritually and physically lost in the endless sea. The stars were guides because they chose to be, and humanity's role was to be worthy of that guidance. This philosophy stands in absolute opposition to the extractive impulse. You do not mine your ancestors. You do not drill into the face of a guiding spirit to see what valuable minerals lie beneath. To do so would be the ultimate betrayal of that sacred trust, an act of profound ingratitude that would, in this worldview, inevitably lead to catastrophe not as a punishment, but as a natural consequence of a broken relationship. The stars would simply cease to guide. The Polynesian approach was one of deep listening and harmonious integration. They saw themselves as part of a cosmic ohana, or family, that included the land, the sea, the sky, and all the beings within them. Space mining, by contrast, is an ideology of separation and domination. It is the ultimate expression of seeing the universe as a collection of dead objects for us to use. The Polynesian worldview asks a devastatingly simple question. If we treat the heavens as a quarry, what happens when we need them to be a compass again? If we commodify the very stars that once guided us to new life, what guiding light will be left for our children when they are truly lost? The kapu were not limitations on human potential. They were the guardians of a wisdom that understood our survival depends on humility, reciprocity, and recognizing that the most valuable things in the universe cannot be mined because they are not things at all, they are relationships. But perhaps no ancient story captures the essence of our current technological ambition more perfectly than the Greek myth of Icarus. While it doesn't involve digging into the moon, it serves as the ultimate allegory for the kind of hubris that space mining represents. The tale is deceptively simple. Icarus and his brilliant father, Daedalus, are imprisoned in the labyrinth on the island of Crete. Daedalus, the master craftsman, devises an ingenious escape plan. He fashions 2 pairs of wings from feathers and wax, creating the world's first flying machine. This was a breathtaking act of innovation, a technological leap that defied the natural order and offered the ultimate freedom. Before they take flight, Daedalus gives his son a crucial warning. He instructs Icarus to follow a middle course, not to fly too low, lest the sea spray clog the wings, and not to fly too high, lest the sun's heat melt the wax. It was a warning about balance, about understanding the limits of the technology you wield. Icarus, exhilarated by the sheer power of flight and the thrill of his newfound freedom, ignores this wisdom. He soars higher and higher, drunk on the sensation of touching the heavens. He feels invincible, a god challenging the sun itself, but the laws of the universe are unforgiving. The wax softens, the feathers scatter, and Icarus plummets into the sea, his incredible flight ending in a catastrophic fall. The ocean that was meant to be his path to freedom becomes his grave. This is not a story about the danger of flight itself, but about the danger of human arrogance in the face of a powerful invention. The wings were not evil, they were a masterpiece. The problem was the pilot. Icarus's fatal error was believing that his technology severed his connection to natural law, that his artificial wings made him exempt from the consequences of flying too close to the sun. We are now building our own wings of wax and feathers. Our rockets, our drills, our robotic miners are the incredible technology we've fashioned to escape the confines of our planetary labyrinth. And the siren call of the solar system's resources is our sun. It is dazzling, promising unlimited energy, unimaginable wealth, and the future of our species. The warning from Daedalus is the voice of caution we hear from ethicists, environmentalists, and indeed from these ancient myths themselves. They urge us to take the middle course, to proceed with humility and respect for the cosmic environment we are entering, rather than with the reckless abandon of Icarus. Space mining is the modern equivalent of flying too close to the sun. It is the belief that our engineering can overcome any cosmic consequence, that we can take what we want from the celestial realm without upsetting a balance we scarcely understand. The myth warns us that the higher we fly on the wings of our own ambition, the more devastating the fall will be if we ignore the fundamental laws, both physical and perhaps moral, that govern all of existence. Icarus didn't just fall into the sea, he fell from the peak of human achievement. His story is a timeless reminder that the greatest threat posed by any powerful technology is not the technology itself, but the illusion of invincibility it creates in the minds of those who wield it. This sacred relationship with matter stands in stark opposition to the philosophy driving modern space mining, where the alchemist approached a lump of lead with reverence, seeing it as a sleeping potential to be awakened through patient collaboration. The modern miner sees a celestial body as a stockpile of inert resources to be extracted as efficiently as possible. The lunar regolith is not a participant in a cosmic conversation, it is a commodity. An asteroid is not a unique entity with its own history and essence. It is a floating repository of platinum group metals to be captured and processed. This is the ultimate extension of a mindset that sees the entire universe as a dead mechanism, a clockwork of separate parts that we can disassemble for our own use without consequence. Alchemy was a process of becoming for both the substance and the practitioner. Space mining, in its current proposed form, is a process of taking. One seeks a harmonious transformation within a living cosmos, the other executes a calculated subtraction from a perceived dead one. The violation these ancient myths warn against may not be a matter of angering a literal god on a literal mountain, but of violating a fundamental principle of relationship. The alchemical tradition suggests that matter itself might have a sacred integrity, a purpose and a place in the cosmic order that is disrupted by our purely extractive intentions. By treating the moon as a dead rock and not a potential partner in a transformative process, we might be closing ourselves off to a deeper understanding of the universe, one where value is not merely measured in mineral content but in connection and meaning. The punishment for this transgression may not be a thunderbolt from Zeus, but a more subtle spiritual poverty, a future where we are surrounded by the wealth of the stars yet remain utterly lost, having gained the world but forgotten how to truly appreciate its wonders. This ancient warning against reaching too high finds one of its most enduring echoes in the foundational text of Western culture, the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. Found in the book of Genesis, this narrative is often simplified as a folktale about the origin of different languages, but its deeper meaning serves as a profound caution against a very specific kind of ambition. The story begins in the aftermath of the Great Flood with a united humanity speaking a single language. They settle in the land of Shinar and devise a plan. They say to one another, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." Their goal is twofold: to physically access the divine realm and to achieve immortal renown through their own engineering prowess, to make a name for themselves that would rival that of God. They begin manufacturing bricks and using bitumen for mortar, and they start building. This is not a project born of necessity or survival. It is a monument to human hubris, a declaration that through collective effort and technology, humanity could ascend to the level of the gods themselves. God's response is not one of petty jealousy, as it is sometimes misinterpreted, but one of profound corrective action. Seeing the tower, he remarks, "Look, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them." This is a crucial line. The problem is not the tower itself, but the unchecked trajectory of ambition it represents. With their unity and technological capability, there would be no limit to their transgressions. To prevent this, God confuses their language and scatters them across the earth, halting the construction and leaving the tower unfinished. The punishment is perfectly symbolic of the crime. The very tool of their unity, their common language, is taken away, and their drive to avoid being scattered is met with exactly that fate. They are returned to a state of humble limitation. When we view this story through the lens of our current ambitions, the parallels to concepts like space elevators and massive orbital infrastructure are startling. The Tower of Babel was the first proposed space elevator, a physical structure designed to bridge the gap between Earth and the heavens to make the divine realm accessible for human use. Today, that ancient dream is being revisited with serious scientific proposals for a tethered cable extending tens of thousands of kilometers into space, allowing for the efficient transport of people and materials out of Earth's gravity well. The motivation is eerily similar: to make a name for ourselves as a spacefaring civilization and to access the seemingly infinite resources of the cosmos. The myth asks us to consider the spiritual and existential cost of such a physical connection. By tethering our planet directly to the heavens for the purpose of extraction, are we committing the same act of hubris? Are we, in effect, building a modern technological Tower of Babel? The biblical warning suggests that the consequence of such an endeavor might not be a divine smiting, but a more insidious internal fragmentation. The confusion of tongues could manifest today as a catastrophic failure of international cooperation. The very projects that require global unity, like building a space elevator or establishing a legal framework for off-world mining, could be the very things that splinter us into competing factions, leading to a new kind of colonial scramble for the stars that repeats all the worst errors of our terrestrial history. We would be scattered not across the earth, but across a new frontier, divided by corporate interests and national agendas rather than a shared purpose. The story's deeper warning is about the inherent danger of removing all limits. The united humanity of Babel believed that with their technology, nothing would be impossible for them. This is the ultimate transgression in a universe that, according to countless myths, operates on a principle of sacred balance. The tower was an attempt to shatter that balance, to erase the fundamental boundary between the human and the divine. In our modern context, space mining represents a similar erasure of boundaries. For all of human history, the heavens have been a realm of observation, of wonder, of mythology, a source of inspiration precisely because they were out of reach. By turning them into an industrial zone, we risk demystifying the universe, reducing the cosmic wonder that has guided philosophers, artists, and scientists for millennia to a calculated spreadsheet of mineral yields and energy returns. We might gain the resources, but we could lose the very sense of awe that drives us to explore in the first place. The punishment in the Babel story was a forced return to humility. The project was abandoned, and humanity was reminded of its place in the order of creation. The incomplete tower known as Babel, which sounds like the Hebrew word for confused, stood as a permanent ruin, a monument to overreach. Our modern efforts might not end in a sudden, divinely ordained linguistic chaos, but they could very well leave behind a different kind of ruin. A lunar landscape scarred by drill sites, a legacy of orbital debris, and a future where the silent majesty of space is forever interrupted by the noise of our industry. The tower was never finished. The myth implores us to ask if our own celestial towers are worth completing, or if in reaching for the heavens, we are only ensuring our own fall back to a fractured and confused earth. To truly appreciate the Egyptian warning, we must first understand the celestial engine at the heart of their universe. Every single day, without fail, the sun god Ra performed a miracle. He did not simply arc across a passive sky, he sailed. His vessel was the magnificent solar bark, a divine ship that carried the sun itself. By day, this ship, known as Manjet, or the bark of millions of years, journeyed across the heavens, bringing light, warmth, and life to the world of the living. But Ra's work was only half done at sunset. Each night he faced his most perilous and essential task, a journey through the 12 hours of the underworld, the realm of Juat. This nocturnal voyage was not a period of rest, but a fierce, ongoing battle to ensure the dawn would come again. Aboard the night bark Mesektet, Ra was accompanied by a crew of powerful deities. There was Maat, the goddess of truth and order, whose very essence was the balance he fought to preserve. There was Set, the god of chaos and storms, who used his brute strength to defend the bark from its greatest enemy, the monstrous serpent of oblivion, Apep. This colossal snake, embodying pure chaos and non-existence, lay in wait each night, seeking to devour Ra and plunge the cosmos into eternal, formless darkness. The survival of all creation hinged on this nightly battle. The prayers and rituals of the Egyptian people were not merely worship, they were active support for this cosmic struggle. By upholding Maat on earth through justice, harmony, and correct action, they sent spiritual strength to the bark, helping Ra and his crew repel Apep's attacks. When the priests performed their rites, they weren't just asking for favors. They were essential mechanics in the divine machinery of the universe, ensuring the gears of day and night continued to turn. This entire breathtaking process was governed by one supreme, non-negotiable law, the principle of Maat. Maat was far more than a goddess. She was the fundamental order of the cosmos. She was the harmony of the seasons, the predictable rising of the Nile, the path of the stars, and the truth in the human heart. She represented the delicate, perfect balance that held all of creation, gods, humans, nature, and the celestial bodies, in a stable, interdependent relationship. Everything had its rightful place and purpose. The sun had to sail its course. The stars had to hold their positions. To disrupt this balance was to invite Isfet chaos, disorder, and decay, the very force embodied by Apep. The entire Egyptian civilization saw itself as a partner with the gods in the daily act of preserving Maat against the ever-lurking threat of Isfet. This was the core purpose of pharaonic rule, of temple rituals, and of social order. Now, let's view our modern ambition for space mining through this ancient, sacred lens. The moon, the asteroids, the very fabric of space itself were not random rocks, an empty void to the Egyptians. They were integral, functioning components of Ra's bark. They were the channels of the Juat, the markers on the celestial river, the divine machinery that enabled the sun's journey. To send drills and miners into this realm would not be seen as exploration or progress. It would be seen as the most profound and dangerous act of isfit imaginable. It would be the equivalent of a stranger, motivated by greed, sneaking onto the deck of the solar bark in the middle of its battle with Apep and starting to unscrew the planks to see what they're made of. The immediate concern wouldn't be the theft of the wood. It would be the catastrophic distraction, the weakening of the vessel's integrity at the precise moment it needs to be strongest. In this worldview, the consequence of space mining might not be a targeted punishment from an angry god. The consequence would be systemic. By damaging a part of the cosmic engine, we could disrupt the entire mechanism. We might not even know what we've broken until it is too late, until a gear slips, a balance is lost, and the bark falters in its path. The result could be a failure of the daily cycle itself, not necessarily a literal end of the sun, but a metaphorical unraveling of the natural order we depend on. The ancient Egyptian priests would argue that we are tinkering with a system whose complexity we barely comprehend. We see a mineral-rich asteroid, they would see a celestial bolt holding the underworld gates in place. We see water ice in a lunar crater, they might see the sacred waters of Nun, the primordial ocean from which the bark draws its strength. By extracting these resources for our short-term gain, we risk committing an act of cosmic vandalism, inadvertently loosening a screw in the universe that could cause the entire apparatus to shudder to a halt. The warning from the banks of the Nile is not about divine retribution, but about causal folly. It suggests that the universe is a meticulously balanced sacred machine, and that our desire to strip it for parts is the height of ignorance and arrogance. We are not just mining dead rock, we are threatening the very balance that allows the sun to rise. Crossing into the mists of ancient Europe, we find the Celtic traditions upholding this sacred boundary with equally potent and poignant stories. Their mythology is rich with tales of the otherworld, a realm of eternal youth and beauty that exists just beside our own, often accessible through ancient burial mounds, misty lakes, or beneath the waves. This is not a distant heaven, but a parallel dimension of profound power and magic where the gods and the dead reside. Journeying there was possible, but it was governed by strict, unbreakable rules. The most famous of these tales often involves a token of invitation, the silver branch. This was not a mere tree limb, it was a sacred passport, a branch hung with shimmering bells that, when shaken, produced an ethereal music that could lull mortals to sleep or open the very gates between the worlds. To carry the silver branch was to be granted temporary, conditional access to a realm that was not meant for human permanence. The heroes and seers who ventured into the otherworld, figures like Bran Mac Febble or the warriors of the Fianna, were invariably met with breathtaking wonders, feasting halls that never emptied, trees that bore crystalline fruit, and rivers that flowed with the light of the stars. They were often welcomed as guests, entertained, and shown unimaginable splendors, but upon their departure, they were always given the same clear and critical warning: you may partake of our hospitality here, but you must take nothing back with you to the land of mortals. The gifts of the otherworld were to be enjoyed in their proper context. To remove them was to commit a fundamental violation of the natural order, a theft from a reality that operated under different laws. The consequences for ignoring this warning were swift and severe. In one common story, a hero pockets a single, dazzlingly beautiful flower from an otherworld garden as a souvenir. He returns home only to find that centuries have passed in what felt like a single night. And the flower he stole, it has not aged a day, but its very presence in the mortal realm acts as a corrosive anomaly. It begins to wither everything around it, or it attracts spectral guardians, or it causes the ground beneath his feet to become barren. The object itself is not evil, it is simply out of place. Its essence is so potent, so purely of another world, that it cannot exist in ours without causing a catastrophic imbalance. It is a divine contamination. The message is clear: what belongs to the divine realms possesses a sacred integrity that is bound to its home. To rip it from that context is not to gain a treasure, but to unleash a force of chaos into the orderly world of humans. The parallel to our ambition to bring lunar or asteroidal material back to Earth is so direct it is almost unnerving. Our scientists build pristine, hermetically sealed containment facilities like those at NASA, acknowledging a potential, if unknown, biological risk. But the Celtic myth suggests the danger might be far more profound and not merely biological. It proposes a principle of cosmological contamination. The materials we seek to bring back are not just rocks, they are the very substance of the celestial otherworld. They have existed for billions of years in a completely different environment, bathed in cosmic radiation, untouched by Earth's biological processes and unexposed to our atmosphere. They are, in a very real sense, not of this world. The ancient warning asks us to consider not just what we might find in that material, but what we might unleash by introducing it into our closed terrestrial system. Could a pristine extraterrestrial mineral, when exposed to our water and air, trigger unforeseen chemical reactions? Could it interact with our planet's magnetic field or its microbial life in a way that disrupts a delicate equilibrium we aren't even aware of? The myth implies that the act of bringing it here is the violation in itself, regardless of its immediate inert appearance. The otherworld fruit rots not because it is poisonous, but because it is incompatible with mortal reality. Our cosmic souvenirs might carry an incompatibility we are not equipped to measure. The Celts believed that violating the boundary between the worlds didn't just endanger the individual, it risked the very fabric of both realities. A hole was punctured, a balance was tipped. Our modern ambition, viewed through this lens, is not a noble quest for knowledge, but a reckless act of trans-dimensional theft. We are not Bran Macfebble, invited in by the ringing of a silver branch. We are uninvited guests arriving with drills and sample return capsules, preparing to take what we were explicitly warned to leave alone. This profound sense of a cosmic taboo, this warning against bringing the foreign essence of the divine into our mortal realm, finds its most potent and enduring symbol in another Greek myth, the story of Pandora. Like Prometheus, her tale is one of divine transgression and unintended consequences, but it shifts the focus from the act of theft to the danger of unchecked curiosity. Pandora was not a willing participant in her own story, but the gods' ultimate punishment for humanity after Prometheus's theft of fire. Crafted by Hephaestus and endowed with gifts from all the Olympians, she was sent to Earth with a single, mysterious item, a large jar. She was given to Prometheus, Prometheus's brother, whose name means hindsight, and despite his brother's warnings never to accept gifts from Zeus, he was captivated by her beauty and welcomed her. The crucial moment comes when her overwhelming curiosity, a trait instilled in her by the gods, gets the better of her. She lifts the lid of the jar just for a moment, just to peer inside. In that instant, every form of misery and evil that now plagues humanity bursts forth: sickness, death, hatred, envy, strife, and despair swarming out into the world to forever alter the human experience. She slams the lid shut, but it is too late. Only one thing remains trapped inside: Elpis, the spirit of hope. We often misinterpret this myth as a simple warning about female curiosity, but its true depth is far more universal. It is a story about the irreversible nature of certain actions and the unforeseen chain of events that a single act of exploration can unleash. The jar was a sealed vessel containing a complete and balanced, if terrible, system. The moment it was opened, that system was irrevocably released into a new environment where it ran rampant. Pandora did not create the evils, she simply provided the pathway for their escape from containment. Now, let's superimpose this ancient narrative onto our modern ambition. In this allegory, the celestial bodies we seek to mine, the moon, the asteroids, even Mars, are not merely rocks. They are Pandora's jars. They are sealed vessels that have existed in a state of profound isolation for billions of years. their contents perfectly preserved in the ultimate vacuum-sealed container of space. We are Pandora, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desire for the treasures we believe are inside. We are designing the robotic hands that will lift those ancient lids. The myth forces us to ask, what is our modern equivalent of the evils that swarmed from the jar? The dangers could be terrifyingly literal. The first and most obvious is biological. While the chances of finding active alien life are slim, we cannot rule out the existence of ancient, dormant pathogens or prions, microscopic structures that could potentially interact with terrestrial biology in ways we cannot predict. The fine, glass-sharp lunar dust, known as regolith, is itself a physical contaminant, an abrasive powder that could wreak havoc on both machinery and human lungs if brought back in quantity. But the evil could be far more subtle. It could be a previously unknown elemental or isotopic composition that, when introduced into our environment, acts as a pollutant on a geological timescale. It could be a form of crystalline structure or energy signature, stabilized by the unique conditions of space, that becomes unstable and reactive in our atmosphere. Beyond the physical, the myth also warns of societal and psychological evils. The sudden influx of immense wealth from asteroid mining could unleash a new era of destructive greed and inequality, a cosmic resource curse that shatters global economies and sparks conflict. The ability to claim and exploit off-world resources could create a new, terrifying form of colonial oppression, literally elevating a privileged few beyond the reach of Earth's problems while leaving the rest behind. This would be the realization of Elpi's hope remaining in the jar, the grim possibility that the hope for a better future through space mining might remain forever trapped just out of reach while the miseries we unleashed dominate our world. The genius of the Pandora myth is that the punishment was not a targeted strike from an angry god, but a self-inflicted wound born from a lack of foresight. The gods gave Pandora curiosity and the jar, but they did not force her to open it. The responsibility and the catastrophe was hers. Similarly, the cosmos may not actively punish us for mining an asteroid. The catastrophe may simply be the natural, inevitable consequence of breaching a system we do not fully understand. We are preparing to open a jar that has been sealed for 4.5 billion years, confident that we know what's inside and that we can handle it. The myth suggests that such confidence is the height of arrogance. It proposes that some containers are sealed for a reason, and that the greatest danger may not be what we hope to find, but what we never thought to look for. To grasp the depth of this warning, we must journey to the islands of Japan and immerse ourselves in the world of Shinto, one of the oldest continuous spiritual traditions on Earth. At its heart, Shinto is not a religion of commandments or a single sacred text, but a profound, intuitive feeling of awe, a recognition of the sacred essence that animates the entire universe. This essence is known as kami. Now, kami is a concept often mistranslated simply as God or spirit, but that fails to capture its true nature. Kami is the sacred, life-giving energy that resides within and is expressed through the natural world. It is not a separate entity living inside a rock. The rock itself, in its unique form and history, is the kami. The towering ancient cedar tree with its gnarled bark and soaring branches is kami. The powerful waterfall crashing endlessly into the pool below is kami. The gentle, smooth stone found by a riverbank, the mountain that provides for a village, and the wind that whispers through the bamboo forest all are vessels of kami. This creates a universe that is not a collection of dead resources, but a vast, interconnected community of sacred presences. Every object, every force of nature is alive with a divine consciousness worthy of respect. This worldview establishes a relationship with the material world built not on ownership but on reverence. In a Shinto shrine, you will not find grand statues depicting the kami. Instead, you will find a simple, natural object, a mirror, a stone, a specially designated tree. that serves as a yorishiro, a physical anchor that allows the kami to become present and accessible to people. The goal is not to worship from a distance, but to enter into a respectful, reciprocal relationship. Through rituals, offerings, and the maintenance of purity, practitioners seek to communicate with the kami, to express gratitude for its presence, and to ensure harmony between the human and the divine realm. To harm a natural object, therefore, is not an act of vandalism against property. It is a direct act of disrespect toward a conscious, sacred being. It is the equivalent of striking a revered elder or desecrating a temple. Now extend this perspective beyond our atmosphere. In the Shinto view, the celestial bodies that fill our night sky are not dead rocks. They are the ultimate, most powerful yorishiro. The moon, with its serene, silvery light that governs the tides and illuminates the night, is not a barren satellite. It is Tsukuyomi no Mikoto, or a manifestation of that moon kami's power, a celestial deity of immense age and importance. The sun is the glorious Amaterasu Omakami, the great sun kami, from whom the Japanese imperial line was said to descend. Even the distant planets and the shimmering veil of the Milky Way are seen as expressions of a cosmos teeming with kami. Every asteroid, every comet, every speck of cosmic dust, by virtue of its existence within this sacred universe, partakes in this divine nature. From this vantage point, the very premise of space mining becomes an act of profound spiritual violence. Sending a robotic drill to the moon is not a scientific mission. It is an assault on a deity. To carve a trench into the lunar surface is to wound the body of Tsukuyomi. To extract water ice from a crater is to steal the sacred essence of a celestial kami. And to pulverize an asteroid for its platinum is nothing short of the complete and utter annihilation of a unique, ancient consciousness that has journeyed through the cosmos for billions of years. There is no way to frame this as a noble endeavor for human progress. It is the ultimate act of arrogance, the height of impurity, a violent transgression against the most fundamental order of the universe. The consequences in this framework are not necessarily about a kami striking back with a cosmic lightning bolt. The consequence is the severing of the relationship itself. By treating the cosmos as a dead resource, we deafen ourselves to its sacred song. We alienate ourselves from the very wonder that has inspired humanity since we first looked up at the night sky. We would be choosing to live in a spiritually impoverished universe, one where the moon is reduced to $1 value per ton of regolith, and the asteroid belt is seen as a floating junkyard of free parts. The Shinto worldview offers a poignant and challenging counterpoint to our mechanistic drive. It asks us not what we can take from the cosmos, but what we can learn from it. It invites us to approach the heavens not with drills and flags, but with a sense of humble awe, ready to listen rather than to command, to appreciate rather than to possess. It suggests that the true treasure of space is not the minerals we might extract, but the sacred connection we might forge with the infinite kami that dance in the starry night. This profound philosophical chasm between the ancient and modern mind is perhaps the most critical dimension of this entire discussion. For our ancestors, the myths we've explored were not mere stories. They were the operating system for a universe understood as a conscious, interconnected, and sacred whole. Every rock, river, tree, and star was imbued with meaning, purpose, and spirit. The cosmos was a great conversation, and humanity's role was to learn its language and participate with reverence. This worldview naturally fostered a deep ecological consciousness, a recognition that to harm the natural world was to harm a kin, to disrupt a divine balance, to invite catastrophe not as punishment, but as a natural consequence of a broken relationship. The Norse myth of Ymir, whose body became the world, is a perfect example. If the ground beneath your feet is the flesh of a primordial being, you tread lightly. You do not recklessly scar the earth, for it is quite literally your ancestor. Our modern materialist perspective, which has fueled incredible scientific and technological progress, operates on a fundamentally different premise. It sees the universe through a lens of mechanism and dead matter. The moon is a barren rock, an asteroid is a floating mineral deposit, space is an empty vacuum. This view is not inherently wrong. It has been phenomenally effective for manipulating the physical world and understanding its laws, but it is tragically incomplete. By stripping the cosmos of its sacredness, we have reduced it to a collection of resources there for the taking. This perspective grants us tremendous power but offers no inherent wisdom on how to use that power responsibly. It severs the feeling of reciprocity and relationship, replacing it with a logic of extraction and utility. We see this not just in our plans for space, but in the environmental crises unfolding on Earth, the result of seeing forests as lumber, mountains as ore, and rivers as industrial plumbing. The ancient myths, therefore, preserve a wisdom we have desperately lost. They are the cultural DNA of a different way of being, encoding a profound understanding that value is not synonymous with utility. The Polynesian wayfinders did not see the stars as navigation points to be used. They saw them as ancestral guides to be honored. The Shinto practitioner does not see a forest as board feet of timber. They see a community of kami. These perspectives do not reject technology or progress. They simply demand that progress be tempered with humility and guided by an ethical framework that recognizes our place within a larger, living whole. They argue that true intelligence is not just measured by what we can take, but by what we are willing to leave untouched. What might we learn from this ancient wisdom as we stand on the brink of becoming a spacefaring species? We could learn to shift from an ethos of conquest to one of conversation. Before we send drills, we might first learn to listen. Before we claim ownership, we might first seek to understand. This doesn't mean abandoning our ambitions, but reframing them. It means developing a space ethics that goes beyond planetary protection protocols against biological contamination to include a concept of cosmic sanctity, a principle of minimal impact and profound respect for celestial bodies as unique, ancient entities with their own inherent value, regardless of their use to us. It means asking not only can we mine this asteroid, but should we, and what might be the systemic, long-term cost of doing so? The myths provide the questions. It is up to our modern ingenuity to find the answers. Ultimately, these ancient stories challenge us to reunite the two halves of our understanding: the scientific truth of a physical universe governed by knowable laws, and the philosophical truth of a meaningful universe that demands our reverence. They invite us to become not just smarter, but wiser, to see the cosmos not as a dead void to be filled with our noise and industry, but as a silent, majestic cathedral that has inspired awe and wonder since the dawn of human consciousness. The greatest treasure we might find in space may not be platinum or helium-3, but a rediscovery of our own humility, and with it, a wiser, more sustainable path forward. One that honors both the laws of physics and the sacred stories whispered by our ancestors beneath the same starry sky. These ancient warnings are not relics of a forgotten past. They are living, breathing beliefs that continue to guide communities today. In our current moment, as corporations and governments draw up the first blueprints for lunar mines, we are witnessing a powerful modern echo of these mythological cautions. Indigenous groups around the world are raising their voices in protest, explicitly grounding their resistance in the very traditions we have just explored. For the Navajo Nation, the moon is not a resource but a relative. So when NASA, a peregrine lander, planned to carry human ashes to the lunar surface in early 2024 as part of a commercial burial service, Navajo Nation President Bu Nigrin objected in the strongest terms, calling the act a profound desecration of a sacred space central to their creation stories and cultural practices. This was not a metaphorical complaint, it was a defense of a living cosmology, a plea to respect a celestial body they believe is imbued with divine presence. Similarly, the Hawaiian community, whose connection to the night sky is woven into the very fabric of their language and identity, has been a vocal critic of the massive telescope constructions on Mauna Kea, a mountain they consider the pico or navel that connects their islands to the heavens. For them, these projects are not progress but a form of cosmic colonialism, an extension of the terrestrial land grabs that have disenfranchised them for centuries, now reaching into the stars themselves. These contemporary movements force a critical and uncomfortable legal and ethical question onto the global stage. How do we define space? The dominant framework, enshrined in treaties like the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, views it as a frontier, a vast, empty commons open for exploration and use by all humanity, so long as no single nation claims sovereignty. It is a law of the gun, translated for the rocket age, prioritizing access and utility. But indigenous perspectives offer a radically different paradigm, space as heritage. This viewpoint argues that celestial bodies are not empty voids but cultural landscapes, deeply embedded in human history, spirituality, and identity. They are, in a very real sense, the common heritage of all humankind, not because we can all use them, but because we all have a stake in their preservation and a story that connects us to them. This shifts the ethical obligation from one of exploitation to one of stewardship. The legal implications of this shift are enormous. It challenges the very foundation of space law, suggesting that use should not be the default, that some places, like the lunar poles or certain asteroid groups, might be designated off-limits to mining due to their supreme scientific value or, for the first time ever, their cultural and spiritual significance. It asks us to consider a concept like celestial sanctuary or off-world cultural heritage sites, protecting these areas not for what we can take from them, but for what they mean to us. This resistance is a powerful call to integrate wisdom with knowledge, to ensure that our leap into the cosmos is guided not just by engineering marvels and economic models, but by a deep, humble respect for the stories that have always connected humanity to the infinite. And so we arrive at the pivotal question, the bridge between the whispers of the past and the hard data of the present. If we set the ancient stories aside for a moment and look at our plans through a purely rational, scientific lens, do these mythical warnings hold any weight? The remarkable and perhaps unsettling answer is that modern science is beginning to articulate risks that sound like direct translations of those age-old prophecies into the language of physics and biology. The first and most immediate danger is one of contamination, a concept that would be deeply familiar to the Celts warning of otherworldly objects or the Greeks cautioning against Pandora's jar. When we discuss bringing materials back from the moon or asteroids, scientists use two specific terms, forward contamination and back contamination. Forward contamination is about us polluting other worlds with our earthly microbes, potentially ruining forever our chance to discover if life exists or ever existed there. But back contamination is the true Pandora scenario, the risk of introducing something extraterrestrial to Earth's biosphere. While the likelihood of a sci-fi-style alien pathogen is considered extremely low, the potential consequences are so catastrophic that NASA and other space agencies have entire planetary protection protocols built around it. The concern is less about little green men and more about the unknown. We are dealing with material that has been isolated for billions of years, subjected to intense radiation and vacuum conditions utterly alien to our planet. Could it contain a previously unknown prion-like structure or a reactive chemical compound that, while harmless in the void of space, interacts with our environment in a destructive way? The myth speaks of a closed jar holding unimaginable evils. Science speaks of a pristine, sealed biosphere that we are preparing to open. Beyond biological risks, there is the very real physical problem of orbital mechanics and the delicate gravitational balances that govern our solar system, a concern that resonates with the Chinese myth of Yi and the suns, or the Maasai story of the moon's careful positioning. Our solar system is not a collection of isolated objects floating independently. It is a complex gravitational web, a cosmic clockwork where every gear, no matter how small, influences the others. The asteroid belt, for instance, is not a random debris field. It's a stable region shaped by Jupiter's immense gravity, acting as a shepherd that prevents most asteroids from careening into the inner solar system. Now consider the long-term implication of large-scale mining operations. If we were to significantly alter the mass of a sizable asteroid, or worse, change its orbit through the process of capture and extraction, could we inadvertently nudge it onto a new trajectory? We are talking about playing a game of gravitational billiards on a solar system-wide scale, with consequences that could unfold over centuries. A seemingly small change in one part of the system could have unforeseen and potentially disastrous ripple effects elsewhere, a phenomenon known as chaotic motion in orbital dynamics. We are only just beginning to model these complex interactions with any real accuracy, and the ancient warning is clear. Tampering with celestial bodies is an act of profound responsibility because you are not just moving a rock, you are adjusting a component in an engine of incomprehensible scale and precision. Finally, science is now giving us the language to understand the most abstract of the mythical warnings, the idea of cosmic balance and interconnectedness. The Norse concept of Yggdrasil, or the Egyptian principle of Mat, finds a modern parallel in the study of complex systems theory. This field of science examines how the components of a system, whether it's a rainforest, a global economy, or a solar system, interconnect and influence one another in often non-linear and unpredictable ways. A small change in one part of the system can lead to massive, cascading effects throughout the whole. We see this on Earth with climate change. The simple act of burning fossil fuels, which seemed like a straightforward energy solution, is now triggering a vast and complex reorganization of our entire planetary climate system. Space mining presents us with the ultimate complex system. We are proposing to industrialize a realm we are only beginning to understand, introducing new variables like large-scale transport, resource processing in orbit, and the creation of orbital debris fields on an unprecedented scale. The potential for unintended consequences is staggering. Could the dust plumes from lunar mining, for example, affect the tenuous exosphere of the Moon in ways that impact future scientific study? Could the accumulation of debris around valuable asteroid resources create navigational hazards that effectively lock us out of those regions in the future? The myths warned of gods angered by human arrogance. Science warns of a system reacting to a destabilizing input. The outcome is the same, a cascade of problems we did not anticipate and for which we may have no solution. In this light, the ancient stories cease to be mere superstition and emerge instead as a profound form of systems thinking, a cultural memory that understood the universe as a deeply interconnected whole long before our equations could prove it. They weren't predicting the future with magic, they were using narrative to encode a vital truth about the nature of reality, a truth that our own science is now, finally, beginning to verify. But what if the uncanny similarities in these myths point to something deeper than mere coincidence or shared cultural observation? What if they are not just warnings from our ancestors, but manifestations of a fundamental part of the human mind itself? To explore this, we must turn inward to the realm of psychology and consider the groundbreaking work of Carl Jung. He proposed the concept of the collective unconscious, a deep, shared layer of the human psyche that is not shaped by personal experience, but is inherited, common to all of humanity. Within this collective unconscious reside the archetypes, universal, primordial patterns of behavior and imagery that form the basic blueprints of our stories, our dreams, and our deepest fears. These myths of celestial violation are not simply tales told around ancient campfires. They are the language of the collective unconscious speaking to us, using powerful symbolic narratives to express truths we all intuitively feel but often struggle to articulate with logic alone. The recurring figure of the ambitious hero, the Prometheus, the Gilgamesh, the Yi, is itself an archetype. He represents the human drive to transcend our limits, to acquire knowledge, to conquer the unknown. This is a noble and essential part of our nature, the very engine of progress. But these myths don't stop there. They always present the shadow side of this archetype, the catastrophic consequence of that ambition when it is untempered by wisdom, when it becomes hubris. This is the universe's, or the psyche's, way of enforcing a necessary balance. The punishment is not a literal eagle or a wrathful god, but a symbolic representation of a psychological law. Overreach leads to a fall. The cosmos in these stories acts as a mirror for the human soul. To violate its sanctity is to violate a part of ourselves, and the resulting chaos, the unleashed poison of Halahala, the death of Enkidu, the scattering of Babel, is the internal disintegration that follows such an act. It is the feeling of existential dread, the anxiety of having gone too far, the profound guilt and disconnection that arises when we prioritize acquisition over understanding and power over harmony. These stories gave our ancestors a framework to process this deep-seated anxiety about the unknown. The heavens were the ultimate unknown, the realm of the gods, the source of mystery and wonder. To aggressively plunder that mystery was, on a psychological level, to destroy the very thing that inspired awe and provided meaning. It was to kill the mystery, and in doing so, to impoverish the human spirit. The myths argue that some mysteries should remain mysteries, not because we are incapable of solving them, but because their very unknowability is essential to our psychological well-being. It gives us something to aspire to wonder about, to hold in reverence. When we look at the night sky today, we may see planets and asteroids, but we still feel that ancient awe. It is a feeling that precedes telescopes and science. It is a primal, archetypal response. The drive to mine the stars is the modern expression of the heroic archetype, and the deep unease it stirs in so many of us is the shadow archetype, warning us of the potential cost. This Jungian interpretation doesn't invalidate the literal or scientific warnings. It adds a crucial, deeply human dimension to them. It suggests that the greatest danger of space mining may not be an external catastrophe, but an internal one. The spiritual and psychological emptiness that could follow from treating the infinite, wondrous cosmos as merely a bigger, more exotic quarry. We risk not just an environmental collapse in space, but a collapse of meaning within ourselves, fulfilling the oldest prophecy of all, that in seeking to possess the heavens we might lose our very soul. This drive to extract untold wealth from the heavens invites a chilling parallel from Greek mythology, the story of King Midas. You remember his wish, the divine gift that everything he touched would turn to gold. At first, it was a dream come true, a symbol of unimaginable prosperity. But the myth quickly spirals into a nightmare when his food, his wine, and most tragically, his own daughter, solidify into cold, lifeless metal. The story isn't really about a magical curse. It's a profound warning about the unintended consequences of commodifying absolutely everything, of valuing wealth above all other forms of value. Midas gained the world, but in the process, he lost everything that made that world worth living in. As we look to the skies with the same hungry eyes, we must ask if we are preparing to unleash a modern, cosmic version of the Midas touch. The initial promise of space mining is undeniably seductive. We're told that a single platinum-rich asteroid could contain more of the metal than has ever been mined on Earth throughout human history. The potential seems limitless, a way to solve resource scarcity, fuel a new technological renaissance, and create incalculable wealth. This is the moment Midas touches the rose and watches it gleam. But the myth warns us that the true crisis begins not with the wish, but with its fulfillment. Imagine if we actually succeed. What happens to the global economy when a company or a nation can suddenly flood the market with a massive, newfound supply of a previously rare and precious commodity? The value of that resource wouldn't just dip, it could utterly collapse. This wouldn't be a simple market correction, it would be an economic earthquake. The entire mining industry on Earth, a cornerstone of many national economies, could be rendered obsolete almost overnight, triggering massive job losses and destabilizing entire regions that depend on these exports. The sudden concentration of such unimaginable wealth in the hands of the few entities capable of space mining wouldn't bridge the gap between the rich and the poor. It would blast it into a chasm wider than the solar system itself. We could see the rise of the first trillionaires while nations left behind on Earth struggle with the economic aftershocks. This is the point in the myth where Midas reaches for a piece of bread and finds he can no longer eat. The deeper, more insidious danger lies in what economists call the resource curse, the paradoxical situation where countries with an abundance of non-renewable resources often experience less economic growth and worse development outcomes than countries with fewer natural resources. This curse manifests as corruption, inequality, and a stifling of other industries. Now extrapolate that to a cosmic scale. If the primary driver of wealth becomes the extraction of space-based resources, what incentive is there to invest in recycling, in sustainable practices, or in innovation here on Earth? Why develop complex systems to manage our finite planetary resources when we can simply go and get more from the next asteroid over? This mentality risks creating a space-based sugar rush of wealth that masks a profound societal stagnation. We would become dependent on this celestial pipeline, and like Midas, we would find that our golden touch has made us poorer in the things that truly matter: resilience, ingenuity, and the health of our home planet. The myth warns that some things lose their essential value, their very purpose, the moment you turn them into a commodity. You cannot eat gold, and you cannot breathe platinum or drink liquid helium-3. By focusing solely on the market value of these space resources, we risk forgetting their true value is only realized when they are integrated into a functioning, equitable, and sustainable system for humanity. This is the ultimate warning from the Midas story. His punishment was not delivered by an angry god. It was the direct, inevitable result of his own short-sighted desire. He didn't think about what his wish would truly mean for his life. In our race to mine the sky, are we pausing to consider the full spectrum of consequences? The ancient myth urges us to look beyond the glittering promise of unlimited wealth and ask the harder questions about what kind of future we are actually building. Are we creating a future of sustainable abundance, or are we simply setting the stage for a new kind of scarcity, one not of materials but of meaning, stability, and equity? The golden touch is not a blessing if it prevents you from truly touching anything at all. Perhaps the most profound loss we risk in this endeavor is not measured in ecological damage or economic fallout, but in the slow, silent erosion of our own souls. The dimming of that innate, childlike wonder that has always drawn our gaze upward. For millennia, the night sky has been humanity's ultimate cathedral, a boundless dome of mystery that has inspired our greatest art, our most profound philosophy, and our deepest questions about our place in the grand scheme of things. It has been the canvas for our myths, the clock for our seasons, and the silent witness to all of human history. This relationship was never one of utility, but of awe. The moment we shift from seeing the moon as a sacred grandmother, as the Anishinaabe do, or as the serene Tsukuyomi of Shinto, to viewing it primarily as a site for helium-3 extraction, we commit a profound act of spiritual self-mutilation. We are not just changing what the moon is, we are changing who we are in relation to it. We are trading a relationship of reverence for one of transaction, and in that trade we risk bankrupting our own sense of meaning. The myths were the guardians of this sacred relationship. They were not primitive explanations for natural phenomena. They were the poetic, narrative containers for a fundamental truth, that a universe experienced as enchanted and alive is a universe that nourishes the human spirit. An asteroid is infinitely more valuable as a character in a cosmic story, a potential teacher, than it will ever be as a mere lump of platinum. By preserving these stories, our ancestors were not resisting understanding. They were ensuring that our pursuit of knowledge would always be tempered by humility and grounded in a sense of the sacred. They understood that to strip the cosmos of its mystery is not a victory of enlightenment, but a failure of imagination. Unfettered space exploitation, driven solely by a materialist paradigm, threatens to complete this disenchantment. If every celestial body becomes a potential quarry, then the infinite majesty of the Milky Way is reduced to a ledger of assets and liabilities. The silent, awe-inspiring void becomes merely a shipping lane. The spiritual cost is a deep and lingering loneliness, a cosmic alienation where we find ourselves the masters of a universe we have rendered empty and silent, having methodically dismantled all the bridges of meaning and connection that our ancestors so carefully built. We might gain the whole universe, but we will have lost the very thing that made it worth exploring in the first place, its soul, and by extension, our own. So how do we translate these ancient whispers into a practical, modern framework for action? How can the wisdom of Prometheus and the caution of Pandora actually shape the treaties and protocols that will govern our future in space? The first step is to expand our definition of planetary protection beyond its current, narrow focus. Right now, international guidelines are primarily concerned with forward contamination, preventing our earthly microbes from polluting other worlds and ruining our chances of finding alien life. This is crucial, but it's a scientific imperative, not an ethical one. We need to develop a parallel concept of celestial preservation, a principle that acknowledges certain places in space hold value far beyond their mineral content or scientific utility. Imagine designating the lunar South Pole with its pristine, billion-year-old ice deposits as a cosmic heritage site, off-limits to mining not because it's scientifically interesting, but because it is ancient, rare, and sacred, the celestial equivalent of a protected wilderness or a World Heritage Site like the Great Barrier Reef. We do this on Earth to preserve beauty and history for future generations. Why should the moon be any different? This wouldn't halt progress. It would simply channel it, encouraging miners to target less pristine, more resource-abundant asteroids while preserving the most significant and symbolic celestial landscapes as common heritage for all humankind, not as real estate for a few. This leads directly to the need for a new ethical framework, one that moves beyond the outdated frontier mentality of the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. That treaty was a product of its time, focused on preventing nuclear weapons in space and stopping sovereign land grabs. It successfully framed space as a commons, but it framed it as an empty commons, therefore the taking so long as no single nation plants a flag. We now understand that it is not empty, but full of meaning, wonder, and potential sanctity. We need a new guiding principle, perhaps something like the prime directive from science fiction, but for our own solar system. A commitment to first do no harm and to prioritize understanding over exploitation. This could involve mandatory ethical impact assessments for any mission intending to alter or extract from a celestial body, evaluating not just the physical and biological risks, but the cultural, spiritual, and symbolic ones as well. It means actively incorporating indigenous perspectives, like those of the Navajo Nation, into the planning process, not just paying them lip service after a lander has already launched. It means valuing the untouched, silent majesty of a place for the awe it inspires, recognizing that this intangible value is a resource in itself, one that is depleted forever the moment a drill bit touches the ground. Ultimately, developing a more respectful relationship with space isn't about halting exploration. It's about maturing it. It's about evolving from a species that conquers and consumes to one that explores and stewards. The ancient myths don't tell us to stay on Earth. They warn us against leaving our humanity behind when we leave. The goal is to build a future where our technology is guided by wisdom, where our ambitions are tempered by humility, and where the silent, star-filled expanse above us remains a source of wonder not just for our generation, but for all who come after. It's about ensuring that as we reach for the stars, we do not become the very monsters our ancestors warned us about. And so we arrive at the profound, unifying thread that connects cultures separated by continents and millennia. The timeless warning against hubris and the vital, humbling wisdom that true strength lies in recognizing our limits. From the eagle tearing at Prometheus's liver to the catastrophic unsealing of Pandora's jar, from the crumbling Tower of Babel to the cosmic poison of Halahala, these stories are not about the gods being petty or cruel. They are intricate, narrative-based lessons in cause and effect, illustrating a universal law that transcends divine whim. The universe maintains a sacred, delicate balance, and arrogant overreach inevitably triggers a catastrophic rebalancing. Hubris in these myths is not merely pride. It is the specific, fatal arrogance that believes our technology, our intellect, and our ambition can sever our connection to this cosmic order, making us exempt from its laws. It is the conviction that we can take without asking, damage without consequence, and alter without understanding. Space mining, in its current envisioned form, is perhaps the ultimate modern expression of this ancient flaw. It is the belief that the silent, ancient cosmos is a dead void, a passive resource for the taking, rather than a complex, interconnected system of which we are a small and interdependent part. We are, in effect, preparing to commit the very same transgression for which our ancestors imagined the most severe punishments, reaching into a realm considered sacred and taking what was not offered, all while assuming we are too advanced to face the repercussions they so vividly described. Embracing humility does not mean abandoning our dreams of space exploration or technological progress. The myths themselves are not anti-technology. Daedalus's wings were a masterpiece, and the churning of the ocean did eventually yield the nectar of immortality. The wisdom lies in the how. A humble approach to space would be a radical shift from conquest to conversation, from extraction to engagement. It would mean pausing in our rush to mine and instead prioritizing a deeper, more patient understanding. Before we send drills, we would send listeners, scientists, and philosophers tasked not just with mapping mineral deposits, but with studying the cosmic ecology, the gravitational harmonies, and the historical significance of these celestial bodies. It would involve developing a new principle of celestial stewardship, where we treat the solar system not as a frontier to be claimed, but as a common heritage to be preserved for all humanity and for all future generations. This could manifest in tangible ways, like legally designating vast tracts of the lunar surface or entire classes of asteroids as wilderness sanctuaries, off limits to development due to their scientific, aesthetic, or cultural value. A concept of off-world national parks that acknowledges some things are more valuable left untouched. This humble path forward would also require us to actively integrate the wisdom of those cultures, particularly indigenous communities, who have never lost their sense of kinship with the cosmos. It means creating seats at the planning table for voices that see the moon as a relative and the stars as ancestors, ensuring that our future in space is guided by more than just corporate prospectuses and geopolitical strategy. Ultimately, humility in space is about recognizing that the universe does not owe us its resources. Our right to explore must be earned through respect, caution, and a commitment to no trace. It is about understanding that the greatest discovery we might make out there is not a new vein of platinum, but a new perspective on our own fragile planet and our responsibility to it. The ancient myths ended with dire consequences for a reason. They were designed to be memorable, to shock the listener into caution. We now have the unique opportunity to heed that warning not out of fear but out of wisdom. We can choose to write a new story, one where humanity becomes the species that learned to look at the infinite wealth of the stars and with humility decided that some treasures are best admired from a distance. And so we find ourselves at the end of this journey, having circled the globe and traveled back through time, only to discover a chorus of warnings so unified it defies simple coincidence. From the frozen north of the Norse myths to the sun-baked temples of Egypt, from the epic poets of ancient Greece to the oral historians of the Hopi mesas, our ancestors, separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, somehow arrived at the same profound conclusion. Do not violate the sanctity of the heavens. This was not a primitive fear of the unknown, but a deeply sophisticated understanding of humanity's place within a vast, interconnected, and living cosmos. They looked up at the starry vault and saw not dead rock and empty void, but a sacred, breathing entity, a realm of ancestors, gods, and guiding spirits, a delicate balance that sustained all of life. Their stories of divine punishment and cosmic consequence were not about arbitrary wrath, but about a fundamental law of cause and effect. That arrogant overreach inevitably triggers a rebalancing, that the violence of taking invites a cascade of unintended ruin. They understood that we are not separate from the universe, but embedded within it, and that our survival depends on humility, reciprocity, and respect for the boundaries of the natural world. This was their wisdom, hard-won and carefully preserved in the most durable container humanity has ever devised, story. And in our headlong rush toward the stars, armed with unimaginable technology but perhaps less wisdom, we are in grave danger of forgetting it all. We stand ready to become the very protagonists of those ancient cautionary tales, the modern Prometheus stealing celestial fire, the Gilgamesh felling the sacred cedars of the cosmic forest, the Pandora unsealing a jar that has been closed for 4.5 billion years. We are preparing to mine the sky with the same mindset that has scarred our own planet, a mindset of extraction, domination, and dead matter, while the whispers of the past urge us toward a different path. They ask us to see space not as a new frontier to conquer, but as a cosmic community to join. They invite us to approach the heavens not with drills and flags, but with a sense of awe and a willingness to listen. This is the critical choice before us now. Will we be the generation that finally heeds these ancient warnings, that chooses to integrate profound wisdom with incredible knowledge? Will we become true stewards of the solar system, leaving wilderness sanctuaries on the moon and designating asteroids as protected cosmic heritage, not because we can't mine them, but because we choose not to? The future is not yet written. The myths gave us the lessons, but we must write the next chapter. It is up to us to decide what story we will tell our own descendants. Will it be a story of short-term gain and long-term catastrophe, or a story of a species that finally grew up, that learned to look into the infinite majesty of the cosmos and see not a quarry to be exploited, but a cathedral to be honored? The silent, starry expanse above has been a source of wonder for all of human history. Let us ensure it remains that way for all who come.